Hi everyone, welcome to our Data Umbrella webinar. Today we will be talking about contributing to ArviZ and open source in general. We have here Oriol with us. So first, I will share with you a small agenda. We'll have a small intro to Data Umbrella, and then we will get to back to Oriol to have the talk. And in the end, we have our space also for questions and answers. You can post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A tab that you will see in the platform. Okay, what is Data Umbrella? We are a community for underrepresented persons in data science. We are a non-profit organization. So this is our team. We have here Reshma, that is the founder of Data Umbrella, and we have all the volunteers. Reshma is a statistician and data scientist, and you can find her on Twitter, LinkedIn, and GitHub. Also, I'm Sandra Meneses. Also, you can find me on LinkedIn and GitHub. We have a very basic code of conduct, so that is very simple to follow. We want to provide a harassment-free experience for everyone and to have a welcoming community. So please be kind to others and behave professional and be respectful with everyone. If you want to support us, the most important thing, of course, is to follow our code of conduct. The second thing that you can do also is to participate in, we have Discord. You can there ask and answer questions so that you can get involved with our community. Another way to help us is to donate. We are in Open Collective and in Benevity. So we are there as Data Umbrella, and you can donate. We have a YouTube channels where we have a series of videos mainly related to data science and open source and other topics. Among them, we have the career advice list where you can find advice to find a job in data science and how to build your career. We have a series of playlists. As I mentioned before, career advice. We have also data visualization, data science for beginners, when we have topics around Jupyter Notebook, pandas. We have also lists specific to contribute to open source, like this one. That is, you can find information to contribute to Python, pandas, NumPy, and also to scikit-learn. We have also our PyMC series, where also we have a talk with Oriol there, and our NumPy series. If you want to get to know about our events, you can sign up for our newsletter. And in our website, we have resources that are very useful for also, again, contributing to open source and guides for using inclusive language, accessibility and responsibility, ethics, and more. Especially, we have a list also for conferences so that you can get to know about events related to data science. We are in all social media channels. The most useful one is Meetup, where you can get to know about our upcoming events. And in YouTube, you can find the recordings of the previous webinar that we have had. We are very active on Twitter and LinkedIn. Here in the platform, you can have an option for live captioning if you want to use it. We also, as I mentioned before, we work with volunteers. So now we are calling for volunteers to add the timestamps of our videos, which is very useful for other people to find our content. So if you are interested in this, you can go to our in GitHub to our organization, that is Data Umbrella, our in the repository event transcripts, and the issue 92, where you can find the list of the videos that we have to transcribe. So our upcoming event is on December 6th, and it's about career advice, is how to land your first job in data science. So if you are interested, you can sign up for this in a meetup. So now let's go to our talk today. That is about contributing to ArviZ and open source, social and technical sites. Our next speaker is Oriol Abril. So Oriol is an ArviZ and PyMC member who does a lot of technical work, but also focuses on non-technical work that is very essential as building a community and mentoring new contributors in these projects. He has been doing that for the past 3 years and currently is working as a freelancer around open source and Bayesian statistics. You can find him in GitHub and Twitter. Here you can see the how to find him. Don't forget to post your questions in the chat or in the QA and answer tab. And with this, I hand it over to Oriol. Welcome, Oriol.
Hello, thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. I will be talking, as Sandra said, on contributing to ArviZ and open source, and I will speak about both social and technical sides. I have tried to make the talk go from more general remarks, which I'll try to go a bit faster over, and then towards more specific remarks that are only applicable and related to ArviZ. But hopefully this will also make at least part of the talk useful and at least orientative to anyone who wants to contribute to open source, even if it's a library that has nothing to do with ArviZ, PyMC, or Bayesian statistics or anything of the sort. If you are interested in contributing to ArviZ, then the talk should be directly actionable. I think before starting, I also want to start with a bit of a disclaimer, which is that this talk is mostly based on my personal experience. So I will emphasize some things that is because I have generally struggled with them when I was starting, or I still struggle with them. You may struggle with other things, but hopefully it will still be useful either way. So, as I said, the talk is a bit personal because it stems directly from my personal experience with programming, Git, and open source. So here's a little bit of a timeline related to all of these things. So I started programming with Python and MATLAB right before I started my bachelor. Then I used both of them during my bachelor. And at that time, I barely even know what open source was, other than I'm using Python, and Python is free, whereas MATLAB, I can only use it because the university is paying for the license. Then, towards the end of my bachelor, I started using Git for personal projects, but I use it only as a completely linear version control system in which I committed changes so that if I messed up at some point, I could just go back in time, but I zero collaboration, zero branches. I didn't use many features of Git. In 2019, I started contributing to ArviZ as preparation for the Google Summer of Code program, to which I was accepted, and I worked with ArviZ during the summer. And during the summer and after Google Summer of Code, I also started contributing to other open source libraries like PyMC. But being able to dedicate time during my summer and be paid for that in order to get started was very important for me. Okay. So in general, contributing guides and ArviZ is not a very big exception of that. We try to emphasize some other things, but contributing guides generally focus on how to contribute, and they cover maybe a bit of what to contribute. And even though I did struggle with GitHub branches and all these a bit more advanced GitHub features when I started, I struggled much more with finding where and what to actually contribute, because I found an issue and I didn't know where to get started, or I found a pull request that was stale and I wanted to work on that, but I didn't know how to go about all of this. And this has a lot of social interactions and unwritten, very often, rules that are specific to each project, so it can be also a bit difficult to navigate. And actually still today, when we organize sprints, for example, I dedicate much more time to triaging issues and finding the things that we will recommend the participants to work on than the time that or at least that I dedicate to writing the how to contribute guides. And one of the main issues with the three first questions is that they are often personal and depend on the person who's asking, and that they are, even when you constrain to a specific person, there are also many possible answers and all of them are correct. So why would you want to contribute to open source? So there are many different reasons for which you might want to contribute to open source. And this is a question that doesn't directly define the next steps that you should take, but I think it's important to try to keep this on the back of your mind when you consider the next questions. So for example, if you are interested in building a community, you'll probably be much better off in a community-driven open source project, which values community-related contributions and also that has clear governance, for example, so you can, after a while, even start leading activities and things like that. Whereas if your main goal is to advance your career and you have some field or company that you are interested in, then you might be better off by contributing to libraries that are backed by these companies and things like that. And these dimensions overlap, but they don't always overlap. So if you do not take this into account at all, you might find yourself not reaching your goals or not having your work recognized, no matter how hard you actually work. So I have already started speaking a little bit about libraries on which to contribute, so I will focus here in this where to contribute point about the types of contribution. So will you contribute to the documentation, to the code, to community events and things like that? Because also, like I mentioned before, contributing guides are generally about how to contribute, but in most of the cases we can even be more specific than that and say that contributing guides are about how to contribute code. So there is often not a lot of guidance on how to contribute to other things, and there are many other things in addition to code that are needed in open source projects. Documentation, event planning, issue triaging, helping users and other contributors on the project forums, also code and so on. And I think that depending on the goal that you have in mind from the first question, you might also already constrain some of these points. So in my case, for example, huge part of my current knowledge on Python, PyData libraries like Matplotlib, ArviZ, PyMC, Pandas, and so on, comes from having answered questions on PyMC and Stan Discord sites, on ArviZ issues, and forums like that. because they forced me to face scenarios that were different from what I was doing, so I couldn't like act on reflex, let's say, on memory, and do basically very often the same thing. And also, even if your goal or your end goal is to contribute code to the library, you might often need to do some very deep dive into the code base before you can actually start making changes to the code. And this can be a bit frustrating because you spend time and you still cannot make any contribution. But if instead you contribute and start fixing documentation while you do this deep dive into the code base, then you will be able to start contributing maybe even from the get-go, and you will keep the motivation up. Here in the what to contribute section, we will start getting much more specific to ArviZ. I have tried to split the what to contribute and how to find the specific things that you can work on, not the general type of thing that you want to work on, in 3 blocks. One block would be what I've called issue browsing, which is taking a look at the issues that are open on GitHub until you find one that both catches your eye and seems doable. Second one would be issue finding or creation, which is working on something that you know needs to be improved, or opening an issue on this bug or mistake in documentation or whatever before starting to work on that. And the third one is working on something that was recommended to you by someone else, maybe from the team of that particular library. In my case, for example, my first contribution to ArviZ was of the second type. I ran into a bug doing something that I needed to get done for my master thesis. So I sent a pull request with fix, and after that I moved into the first type for a little bit. Well, more than a little bit, quite a bit, especially for introverted people like me, being able to work and not have anyone know how many issues I am discarding because I have no idea how to go about them is very attractive, but it can also be hard to navigate browsing all the issues. So I would only recommend issue browsing as a starting point. If you already want to know the type of contributions that you want to make, if you're interested in documentation, then you can start browsing issues and take a look at the ones that are related to documentation. If you are interested in coding for visualization, then take a look at the issues that are related to plotting, to the plots module in ArviZ and things like that. I say that because ArviZ is quite a small project and we do not have a lot of time available within the team, which is also quite small. So issue triaging ends up being something that will lack significantly. So even if you go and search for the issues that have the documentation label, you might be missing several issues that are actually related to documentation. You might find issues that have already been fixed and you start looking at the code to see how to fix it and you don't find it, and it's because it was actually fixed already, but we didn't remember to close that issue and tag it and so on. So that's why it is an attractive thing to do, but you also have to be wary about the potential downsides of this. Issue finding and creation is also great as a way to decide what to contribute on. You can also, if you have a bit of an idea on where you'd like to contribute. So if you want to contribute to the documentation, then you can start checking the examples in the docs, running the code in there, see if that it still runs, maybe it has become outdated, and things like that. And once you find something, because you will definitely find something, it's not an if, that needs improving, then I recommend you open an issue, and then you can, after that, start working on that. I recommend very strongly that you open an issue before starting to work and opening a pull request, because this will notify the team about the issue, and you should also outline the proposed fix, so that we might have some feedback already at that stage, and also to signal to other potential contributors that you are working on this, so we don't at some point find two pull requests that are fixing the same thing, and we only can merge one because they are doing the same thing. So one of them, all this work needs to be discarded. But I have bolded here issue direction, because this is generally the least common way for people to contribute, but I think that it is probably the most flexible and direct one, because, as I said, issues might not be at the best triaging state. Some of them are outdated, and so on and so forth. So if you reach out to us on GitHub or GitHub discussions, or even an issue that is close but not exactly what you want to do, then once we know a little bit what are your interests, what are your skills, what are you trying to get out of contributing to ArviZ, then we will do our best to point you to an issue or a task that might not even have an open issue yet, that fits as best as possible your goals and your objectives. Okay, so now let's go to how to contribute in a bit more detail than what the contributing guide says. So the ArviZ contributing guide actually has an overview of many different contribution tabs available. You can start browsing that already to answer the where to contribute question. And for each of the points, we try to link to resources that will help you in translating, in documentation, in code, and so on and so forth. I can show you this page quickly. Here, so you have contributing to ArviZ, a bit of a welcome message, and then different types of contribution, creating issues, translating, reviewing pull requests, managing issues, writing documentation, and also making code changes. Each of them has some links that go a bit more into detail on how to do each of these tasks. So now for this how to contribute section, I will start with a very small pull request to ArviZ, and then I will show two closed pull requests from the last month as examples to also illustrate a little bit better potential pull request dynamics, and also explain how each of those came to be, how the submitter chose what to work on, and how, and so on. All of these three examples will be GitHub centric on documentation and code, and there are other things but it is harder to get into them and give specific details on how to contribute without having someone like a mentoring session or a sprint that is dedicated to some specific translations or things like that. But you do not need to contribute necessarily to either docs or code. You can do many other things too. And they will also be very welcome. So I will start with this documentation fix of an issue that I opened and reserved earlier today, and I will follow the ArviZ pull request tutorial step by step, and we'll go and try to do a pull request quickly. So here we have improve compact prop and chain prop docstring in the plot trace function. The description is updated, and so here let's go. Here, yeah. Okay, perfect. Screen. Right. Okay. Can you see both screens side by side?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I will start doing these steps. However, these steps are for the first time you submit a pull request. So it says fork the project repository, which is something that I have already done. So I will modify some of these steps to be like second, third, or any other pull request that is not the first. So you can see that I am on the main branch. You can do git status to see it. It says on branch main, but in Catalan. So then we start with git fetch upstream. This is taking all the changes from the ArviZ repo, not the fork, but the main ArviZ repo. Then we rebase on upstream main, which makes sure that our branch is up to date with the upstream main branch, which is the branch that has ArviZ in GitHub. And once we have done that, which is like simulating that we are on a clean fork, then we can start with step 4. So git checkout my feature. Here I'm going to say fix plot trace doc. So here now I'm on a different branch. You can see git status on branch fix plot trace doc. I have already installed all the requirements, but just to show here, I would do conda activate ArviZ, which is the environment I use to develop on ArviZ, and then I would pip install requirements docs, and this installs all the requirements for the documentation. Here it has updated things or downgraded. Yeah. Okay, so now we modify, develop the feature on your feature branch. So that would be fixing the docs, ArviZ plots trace plot. So we move to the doc string and then search for compact prop here, string or dict, array and says tuple containing the property and the property values to distinguish different dimensions with compact equals true. Whereas here what we want is string or dictionary is already above, so we will start with define the property name and the property values to distinguish different dimensions with compact equals true.
Hey, Oriol, if you want to make that font on the left a little bit smaller, it's okay, because we can see it and then it won't wrap as much if you want.
The font. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just a little smaller.
Yes?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, okay. So then when compact equals true, it defaults to color. It is ignored otherwise. And then for chain prop, similar thing, defines the property name, property values to distinguish different chains. If compact equals true, it defaults to line style. Otherwise, it uses color to distinguish different chains. Wait. Okay, so let's save this and then git status again, and you can see that I have a file that has been modified. So then I do git at ArviZ plots trace plot and git commit with the message straight away, which says fix chain prop and fact prop docs. Okay, so now we have done this part. Here it says to make sure you have updated, which is the step that we did at the beginning. And now I push the changes to GitHub. Here I use origin instead of upstream, so that I push to my fork instead of the main ArviZ repo directly. So git push U to set the upstream, origin fix plot trace doc. Yeah. Okay, so now you can see that everything was pushed and uploaded and everything, and here we have this link, which is a link to open pull request directly, which is where we'll go now. When you start opening the pull request on GitHub, make sure to check here that the base repository is ArviZ devs, because this is something that you cannot change later. And sometimes, I don't know why or how or when, really, GitHub uses your own fork, which is not what you want to do. So here we are saying that we want to merge the changes in FlixPlot trace into the main branch of ArviZ. So description, fix that were outdated, and add the in description. The template is very generic, so I am doing this. It doesn't need a plot because it's not plot related. It's properly documented. It is. It doesn't have new tests. It has the correct documents now, and it is not listed in the changelog yet. Now I can create the pull request, and here you can see the changes that we have done. I will now share this on the chat. so now some checks will start to run. These take a while, so do not wait for the checks to finish, and also generally do not wait for someone to review. We will get to reviewing as soon as we can, but it can take a little bit. Hopefully today we will get one review comment relatively quickly. So here you can see that the docs are being built in this check and the other ones are running some tests. Here are the changes. Let's see if we can get the review comment to fix the chain typo. Otherwise, I will just add it myself. Okay, so you can see there's this typo here. So sometimes you will get this kind of comments, which are a suggestion comment, which would be something like that. At comment, and this is fixing this typo. So when you go to the conversation, oh, nice. Okay, so I will commit the suggestion. You can do here from the GitHub directly. So you commit the changes, and then here you can see that there's a new change. So if I were now to add the changes here in the terminal on the changelog and then try to push, I would get an error because we have a commit that's different here that we don't have locally yet. So we have to do git pull, and this is getting this typo fix into our local branch. So then we can go here and update the changelog in documentation, fix typo in fix docstring.
Hey, Oriol, quick question. You did git pull right there, right?
Yes.
Do you have to do git pull from the remote and the branch, or just git pull?
Yes, so I will answer that in a second. Yes.
Okay.
So if you want to be specific, you need to do it manually, but the way we have done things, we have configured the branch so that it tracks a specific branch on GitHub. So when we do git pull, it knows what to do by default. Plot prop and parameters. And this is here 2176 2176 git status, yeah, git. Now you can also do this trick, which is git commit -a to automatically add any files that are already tracked by Git, and then the message at update changelog, and then we can push. And GitHub has this nice feature, which is that pull requests are opened from a branch, not from a commit, so that here you can see how the pull request has been updated, and now it has this update changelog. And when we look at the files changed, there are now 2 files that have been updated with all the changes. So back to your question, Reshma, when we did this git push here, we added this -u flag. This means that we are pushing to origin my feature branch, but also second, we are setting this branch as the default branch. So you can see that when I do git status now, it says this line, which is origin fixed spot trace, which means that this branch is up to date with this branch in origin. Whereas when you create a new branch, check out the test branch, this is not tracking anything from GitHub. So if I try to git pull, it won't work. There is not enough information you need to define.
Got it. So that just means that, for example, if I were doing this on scikit-learn, it probably wouldn't work because it's not configured that way. It's configured for this particular project, right?
It's configured if you have used this. It's either the U flag or this set upstream flag.
Okay.
When you push.
Got it.
So it will be git push set upstream, and then origin, test branch, and so on. Yeah. So are there any questions about the pull request process and the commands so far?
No questions so far?
Perfect. Okay, so we'll go back to the slides, screen, switch screen to slides. Yep. Okay. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so now let's go over this example of pull requests that improve the documentation. So here we have a pull request that modifies the main page of the contributing section. So it's the pull request that is actually responsible for this looking this nice and having all of these different types of contributions outlined in each subsection. And you can see that it modified 4 files, but most of them were adding these targets, so then we can link easily from one page to the other in the documentation. It has only modified markdown files, so no code at all. And this pull request was actually one pull request that started as the issue direction block that I mentioned before, because Gayatri reached out to me in the Write the Docs Slack, and then we discussed different ways that we could improve the homepage or the contributing page in the ArviZ documentation. So then she submitted the pull request, I added a few comments and so on, and then eventually we merged the pull request. The second pull request is a bug fix pull request that I sent earlier this year. So here I modified this line to do something slightly different, and then I added the test for this. And I like this pull request because it's a good example and also public service announcement, because when you open a pull request, you saw that you get all this wall of text, which can be maybe too intimidating, which is a pull request template that explains a little bit what you should do. But you can see that we actually use the pull request template, especially the checklist, because it is very useful. So in this case, follows official pull request format. It includes a new or updated test to cover the new feature, and the code status correct, and it is listed in changelog. So when you open a pull request to ArviZ, if you do, which I hope some of you will, any suggestion to make the pull request template a bit more friendly and easy to use will be super welcome, because this is something that I have noticed it is usually or sometimes overlooked, but I think it can be very helpful, especially when you are starting. And you can see I have submitted over 270 pull requests to ArviZ in the last 3 years, and I still use the checklist to make sure that I do all the steps correctly. And in this case, this pull request would be the issue finding type, because I ran into this issue and I submitted a fix to this. And this is all from my side. So any questions that you have, now is the time to ask them.
Thank you, Oriol. We have a couple of questions here. Are there any plans to have a contribution session for ArviZ, such as an open source sprint?
Yes, hopefully we will be able to do it sometime soon in early next year, something like that. As I said, the main limiting factor in ArviZ is that there isn't a lot of people in the ArviZ team, so finding enough of us to be available at the same time to host a sprint or contributing session and be actually able to review and to help everyone is not easy. But now some of us will be working part-time thanks to some CZI funding and things like that, which should make it easier. I think it will definitely be possible, and it is something that we would like to do.
How can people get to know about these events? If you do this sprint, for example?
Sorry?
How can people get to know about this sprint, the moment that you organized?
I think the best way is probably to subscribe to either ArviZ Stack in PyMC, Stan, Discourse, something like that. Follow ArviZ on Twitter. Yeah.
Okay. We have another question here. Do you need to be an ArviZ expert to contribute to the project?
Definitely not. So for example, the pull request that I showed as a doc contribution pull request that Gaisa sent, Gaisa is a technical writer who has never used ArviZ, and she was still to make an amazing pull request that was super helpful.
Okay. We have another question here. Do you have regular project meetings, and are they open to the public?
We don't really have regular project meetings, and so far they have not been open to the public. But if we manage to make some somewhat regular project meetings, then we can make them public if that is something people would be interested in. So if you would like to attend some ArviZ meeting, let us know on Twitter or Twitter or anywhere where ArviZ is available. And that will probably also force us to try and be more strict with the ArviZ meetings, because it has been several months now since the last one.
Okay. Another question that we have here is any idea of how many projects depend on ArviZ, or in which other projects is ArviZ used?
So there are not many projects that depend on ArviZ. The main ones are PyMC and Bambi, because ArviZ is quite a big package, because it depends on matplotlib, on xarray, on netcdf, and so on. So libraries are generally a bit wary of adding ArviZ as dependency, but the main cool thing about ArviZ is that you don't need it as a dependency. You can get your Stan data into ArviZ without ArviZ needing to be dependency of Stan. And for now, ArviZ integrates with PyMC, Stan, like both PyStan, Common StanPy, and Common Stan, with PyJax, with TensorFlow Probability, Pyro and NumPyro, and MC in Python, plus also Stan in Julia, and Source and Turing as well.
Okay, now we have maybe 2 more questions and then we will finish. How long does it take to get a peer review in ArviZ?
This one is very, very variable. We should probably try to run some statistics to make sure we are not dropping the ball too much. It is generally a matter of 1-2 days, but there have been some critical weeks where it has taken over a week to get the first reviews in. Especially if the pull request is very big or a new feature that none of the team members are already familiar with, because then we often have to review the pull request, but also read the article that describes the algorithm and check the math and so on, which takes a very long time. Whereas if it's a small 2 or 3 line pull request fixing a typo or some docstring, thing like that, we can even review it from our mobile while we're on the train or things like that.
Okay. So it depends on the peer, or?
It does depend a little bit on the PR, but I think it depends more on you potentially having the bad luck of landing in some of these critical weeks.
Okay. We have here another question. Do you have any thoughts on imposter syndrome? I remember that was something that hindered me a lot in the beginning. It still does. Maybe some words about it may also be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, so I in my other talk about contributing to PyMC documentation, I added a small diagram on imposter syndrome. Let's see if I can find it. I think this is a very nice image, because I'm also constantly running into imposter syndrome. So there isn't much. I mean, it's not something that I have solved. As I said before, even now when I go over ArviZ issues, there are many of them that it's like, yes, I understand that this is an issue, but I have no idea how to solve it. So I will just move on to the next one, which is why lurking and looking at issues is very attractive, because nobody knows that huge amount of issues that you are discarding and deciding not to work on because you don't know how to start. And so you're probably here and you need someone here, but there's nobody over here on the team. So unless we get more people involved, we will never get to fixing that issue. And if you think that you are here and the other knows how to fix it because they know all of this and the issues around here, and they are not fixing it, generally because they also are here and they cannot fix it either.
Okay. You wanted to show the...
Wait, sorry, so... Okay, this is the image. I have now realized that I wasn't sharing it. So the issue might be over here, and you're here, and you think the other one can solve it, but the other people in the team maybe are around here, so they cannot fix an issue that's here because they don't really know, as opposed to what you might imagine.
Okay, maybe. We have the last two questions now. What are good resources and tutorials to learn ArviZ? How did you learn ArviZ?
I learned ArviZ from the ArviZ documentation and then a little bit from both ArviZ, XRA and PyMC documentation, because they are not exactly the same, but there's a lot of overlap. But this is something that is still very much a work in progress. And in my case, I learned ArviZ through a whole lot of trial and error, and then looking at the code base and checking why the docs were not actually working or things that were missing from the documentation and things like that. Now we do have several newish pages in the documentation, so I would recommend starting with the Getting Started section of the docs, and then looking at the user guide pages that match the things that you want to do. There's, for example, the plotting guides, either with Bokeh or with Matplotlib, that Sandra contributed a while back, which are very good resource too.
And the last question, what do you think, or maybe what do you know about the future of ArviZ in terms of its use?
I think that modularizing and kind of making a bit smaller libraries that are more specific is the way to go. So I think that ArviZ will have a good future and users will continue to increase because there are a lot of probabilistic programming languages and there are still new probabilistic programming languages being built. Facebook released this Bean Machine one at some point during last year, and it now integrates with ArviZ already because this way they don't need to build all of the diagnostics and statistics and solution into the PPL, which is a whole lot of work that you do not need to repeat really. But on the same side of the coin, let's say, ArviZ itself will probably also split into some 2 or 3 smaller libraries. So that, for example, as I said, instead of being this huge library that depends on Matplotlib and NetCDF and so on, you have some more minimal library that has the diagnostics and the statistics that people can more easily depend on without bloating their packages too much.
Okay, so that is the end
Sorry, I just have one more thing to add. I did a search on YouTube for like intro to ArviZ, and I didn't see a whole lot there. And so that seems like a really great potential, topic to share, because there's just, I didn't see a lot of resources out there on it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's a bit challenging also when writing text documentation, because either you assume that people know Bayesian modeling and how to use PyMC or Stan or something like that to generate their data, or you try to explain that, and both are a bit tricky to handle. Because if you kind of decide to use PyMC, then all the Stan users that also use ArviZ will lose on some of the things, or maybe might not look at the video of it, that page. But if you also just start analyzing data without enough context, nobody will understand where the diagnostics and the visualizations are coming from.
Thank you. I'll let Sandra close it out.
Should I stop sharing my screen?
No, it's okay. You can leave your screen on.
Yeah, you can even that. So thanks to everyone who joined the webinar. We will be posting the video on YouTube maybe within a day. Thank you, Oriol, for preparing this nice talk. I hope you guys find it useful. And now we can finish.